Welcome everybody to our property networking for this week. And I was just saying that this is actually in the summer, and I am just about to take the summer off, as I do every year, to spend time with the kids and, you know, able to sort of free up that kind of Monday. So this is our last session for the summer. So school's out for summer. Got that song in my head, so that's pretty cool. And what I really wanted to cover off today is this talk about being persistently consistent to have a successful property business. So I have brought two fabulous people that you all know, and if you don't, you will soon, Wendy, Sneddon and Paul Merrick. So I will introduce them in just a moment. So please, guys, if you can, do ping 6 people that you think this might be interesting for. So I know a lot of us may think we're consistent, may think we're persistent. We also know that there are times when we can procrastinate. There are times when we don't get things done. And I know this morning I had a list of things to get done, and I caught myself a couple of times just going off on a tangent, doing other things. And I had to kind of stop myself, come back to what I was doing. And yeah, I'm pleased that I've actually ticked off everything that I needed to do. So that's a good thing, because it is that kind of consistency that we're going to be talking about. And I like to run them side by side. So let's introduce who's here this morning, and then we can jump straight in. So ladies first, Wendy, if you'd like to introduce yourself, tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. So I and my sister formed a partnership about 6 years ago, Forget Me Not Properties, and we've been doing some buy-to-lets, holiday accommodation, and now we're moving into hotels.
Fantastic. And next up, Paul, if you would like to introduce yourself. I can't believe there'd be anyone out there who doesn't know you, but just in case.
Paul Merrick. Been in business for 45 years. Started when I was 15, in case anybody wants to do the maths. I've been in the property sector for 3 decades as a property developer of both commercial property and residential property. Built up a debt-free portfolio over the years. Currently selling that debt-free portfolio off as I move to being a full-time angel investor. And I also spend a lot of time these days being a business consultant for both smaller businesses and large businesses as well. That about sums me up.
Fantastic, thank you. Right, so let's jump straight in. So one of the things I talk about a lot is this, and I quite like it because it's a bit of a tongue twister, is to be persistently consistent and then consistently persistent. Because what we do, don't we, is we make a commitment to do something. And for instance, I've got this fabulous book that I use, which is called This Is My Era. I absolutely love it. It's kind of, I suppose, my day journal, my to-do list, all of those kind of things. And the reason I love it is it's got today's date, and you just write down the date. So it doesn't matter if you've missed a couple of days or even weeks or months. And when I first started with that, I did literally leave it for weeks and months, and then I'd pick it up again and I'd get going again. And it was one of the things that has really taught me this whole consistently being persistent and persistently being consistent. Because what we tend to do, don't we, is we do something and we make that commitment, right, I'm going to do this for, 5 days this week, or I'm going to send out 5 letters, or I'm going to find, 10 properties this week, and I'm going to view 2, and I'm going to make an offer. But what happens is we get going, like going to the gym, we do it for a few days, and then things get in the way and it kind of crops off. And inherently, quite often, we'll go, oh, well, I better not do that anymore. And we kind of give up. And then that promise to ourselves, the fact that we've then said we're going to do something and we haven't done it, we haven't kept going with it, it internally supports those inner demons that say, well, I told you couldn't do it, said you might not do that. And whether that's you or not, for me, this little book has really helped me, because I've gone, okay, I've missed a couple of days, so be it. I'm going to get back. I'm going to be really persistent in getting back to being consistent. And when you're consistent, there are days, aren't they, where you still wake up and it's like, oh, I just can't be bothered to do that, or this is happening, or maybe I just don't feel on top of the world, or I'm tired, you know, I had a late night networking event and now I'm exhausted, whatever it is. But it's then being determined in being persistent, and it's almost this kind of cyclical thing of consistent persistence and persistent consistency. So I do quite like that kind of it to me is this round circle. And the reason I started talking about that is I am a huge fan of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and in chapter 5, I think it's chapter 9, sorry, is persistence. And I'm just going to read you this. It says, persistence is an essential factor in the procedure of transmuting desire into its monetary equivalent. The basis of persistence is the power of will. Willpower and desire, when properly combined, make an irresistible pair. Men who accumulate, or ladies, obviously, who accumulate great fortunes are generally known as cold-blooded and sometimes ruthless. So there we go. I'm just going to kind of start this as a general chit-chat amongst us. I know I've got a few examples that I want to talk about. But yeah, have either of you two got any kind of thoughts around this? Are you both, clearly, I mean, you must be fairly consistent and persistent, Paul, for instance, to get to the stage where you are. Do you think it's a natural thing that has come to you, or was it something that you've really had to work on?
Consistency, I think we all have to work on. Human beings are consistent at being inconsistent, I think.
I like that. I'm going to use that.
But persistency is something I've had since I was a child, as my parents will testify to. Right? I never gave up. So when I was quite early in business, it's probably worth telling this story. When I was quite early in business, I used to export vehicle components, used vehicle components. And the difficulty was never selling them. It was an interesting business with similarities to property. You know, it's not always the difficulty selling it. Sometimes it's the difficulty getting the product to actually sell at the right price. And there was a chap a few miles away from me. Wendy will know where this is, in a place called Kirkcaldy. In Fife, which is not a million miles away from where Wendy is, and he had loads of the types of engine components that I wanted to buy and sell, and many people had tried to buy these tools, these things off them. Wendy, I think you're kind of open on something, because I can hear or somebody's open on something. I use both open on Clubhouse because I'm getting feedback. Mm-hmm. Could you use mute on Clubhouse? Would that be possible? Could you use to mute?
I think we'll let Wendy mute and see if that's okay.
Okay, there we go. That's better. Thank you very much. So many people had tried to buy these components off of him, but he was one of those hoarders, which I think I've turned into in my old age, but that's a completely different story. And I went to buy them, and it was an interesting that we went into the office, and there was a kind of, if you imagine a long, narrow office, and on the right-hand side, there was a bench seat, and on the left-hand side, there was one of those little glass windows that slide like that. And the secretary sat behind the glass window, and all you seen was this panel and this little glass window. And I said, can I speak to Mr. Muir, please? And she said, what about it? I said, I want to buy all the vehicle components that he has down the bottom of the yard. And she says, I'll speak to him. So she came back out and she said, he's not selling them. And I said, okay, I'll see you next week. And the next week I went back and I sat down and I said, can I see Mr. Muir, please? And she said, what about it? And I said, buying the components down the bottom. I'll be sure. She said, he said last week he wasn't selling them. I said, ask him again. So she went back and he came back. Said, he's not selling them. I went back the third week, and by this time I was taking her a little box of chocolates because we became chums, and I was chatting to her. And in 6 months, I consistently went back, week after week after week after week. And I got very friendly with the secretary, and I used to take her wee gifts like chocolates and flowers and cake sometimes, and it was usually around about lunchtime. And eventually one day, after about 6 months, and it may have been longer, a weird head came to the window and opened the window and went, what do you want? And this was Mr. Muir himself. And I said, see the engine components you have down the bottom of the yard? He said, yes. I said, well, I'm buying them. We just haven't decided how much and when.
Wow.
And he did what you did. He laughed, right? And he said, come in the office. So he sat in the office and he said, what do you want? And I said, there was a particular model of engine called a Gardner. And I said, I want anything with Gardner written on it, even a wheelie boot. If it's got Gardner stamped on the bottom of it, I want it back. And he said, my daughter's about to have a wedding, and it'll the kind of proceeds from this will help kind of pay for a good honeymoon for her. I said, fantastic. And I bought all of the components. And it's a long, boring story, and it goes on even more than that. And I turned out to get to know Mr. Muir quite well, who was a very interesting man. But 6 months it took to buy those. And that was a great lesson early on in business, I think, that persistency wins, right? And to give you an indication of the numbers on that, we bought about enough to fill 2 containers with those engines, which was about, in those days, about £42,000 for the 2 containers. And Mr. Muir took the grand sum off me for his daughter's wedding of £4,000. And that's what he wanted, because that's what paid for the honeymoon. And I said, well, there's £4,000, Mr. Muir. Are you happy with that? And he said, yes. And I said, and there's £1,000 gift for your daughter from our company for our wedding. And it taught me something, that persistency pays off, and it paid off big time. And I could bore you with stories like that all day long. In fact, somebody was asking me recently on Clubhouse, what's the longest deal I've ever done? And the longest it took me to buy a property is 6 years.
Wow.
Persistently, consistently approaching the seller, who wasn't a seller, who didn't have it for sale, because I've built a career buying things that aren't for sale for amounts of money people don't want to sell them for. Yeah,
I love that. So is it, do you think, just to sort of from other people's perspective, I mean, I think, you know, there's the odd person, wouldn't they, who'd go and visit and maybe go for a few weeks. So, for instance, I know that I do and have done a lot of leaflet dropping for our, you know, serviced accommodation, whatever. You know, you arrive at a development site, and I mean, I don't tend to do it myself much anymore, but we still, you know, consistently do it. And I remember sort of saying to them, you know, I'll be back, you know, next month, and they're kind of like, oh, okay. But obviously there were times when, because we were really busy, I wouldn't then go back. And you kind of think that was wrong. I should have kept going no matter what. And there was a number of them, and I would sort of keep forcing it. But inherently, if you were busy and there were other things that were going on, you wouldn't do that. Now, obviously, now we've got sort of more people helping us. We can be a bit more consistent in that approach. But you're going to have people that are thinking, well, you know, I've gone 3 times, I've gone 6 times. What's the point? Because in theory, it may never happen. Like you said, I mean, 6 years is a tremendously long time. What made you believe that it was worth that visit each week? Was it kind of like, if and when is the thought process, if and when he comes to sell, because it's going to happen at some stage, I want to be first on the list? Or was it just like, I'm just going to keep going until I've cracked, you know, I've knocked my head on the wall until the crack starts and then the hole erupted, which is what happened. What was your thought process?
As you know, I don't kind of focus an awful lot on this psychology, right? The psychology, I'm not really one of those, and mindset, right? In fact, the amount of mindset is on Clubhouse upsets me. But I've had this one thing since I was a child, which is, once I decide something, it is. So when I said to Mr. Muir, I'm going to buy those engine components, the only discussion is when and for how much, I decided. Right? And it's interesting because I came from a very poor background, and I've got lots of siblings. And they kind of accepted where they were in life. And my mum and dad were very accepting of where we were in life. You know, I remember having a discussion with my dad when I was about 15 and telling him about my aspirations. And my dad said to me, people like us don't do that, Paul. So they were very much, well, listen, I'm not going to criticise my dad. He had a life experience. He'd had 6 kids. He kept a roof over our head, and as he would say, an arse in our trousers. And he believed that this was his lot. This was his life. And from about 12, I used to wake up virtually every morning and go, this is not my life. This is just not my life. And, when you look at my son and compare it, I was brought up in the East End of Glasgow, and sometimes we didn't know what we were going to eat. And I mean that literally. And my son, goes to one of the best private schools in Glasgow and wouldn't even begin to deal with the concept like most people wouldn't today, that there might not be dinner on the table at the end of the week. That just wouldn't even be real to him, right? So I think you get the life that you go out and take.
Amazing.
Not the life that it gives you. And as part of that journey, and contradicting myself about kind of like, all of this psychology stuff, I remember I've always considered myself in sales. I still consider myself in sales, right? I'm selling myself every day. And our business and, our abilities and et cetera, et cetera. And I remember picking up a tape by Zig Ziglar, the great Zig Ziglar, right? One of the funniest and most entertaining personal development guys you will ever come across, right? And I bought a tape. This is how long ago it is, guys. It was a tape that you played in the car, right? It wasn't quite a gramophone that you wound up, but it was almost there. It was a tape that you played in the car. And I play this tape. And I loved Zig's style. And if anybody's never heard of Zig Ziglar, sadly say he's passed away now. But if you haven't, you're in the audience, you haven't heard of him, go listen. Right, Zig's amazingly funny. And Zig was talking about consistency and persistency. And he said, "Are you a sales guy?" And I said that, and I went, "I'm a sales guy, Zig." And he said, "Can you take rejection?" And I said, "I can take rejection," because I used to talk back to the tape in the car. And he said, "Can you take 1 rejection in a day?" And I said, "Of course I can." He said, "I can take 1 rejection in a day." And the tape went on a bit, and he said, "Can you take 2 rejections in a day?" And I thought, "Yeah, Zig, I can take 2 rejections in a day. I'm a sales guy." "Can you take 3 rejections in a day?" Truthfully, I was beginning to think at this point, it's starting to sound a bit hard, Zig, but yeah, I'm a sales guy. I can take 3 rejections in 1 day. And then he said, "Can you take 4 rejections in a day?" And I thought, I'm going to be a sales guy, Zig. Even if I'm not one now, I can take 4 rejections in a day. And then he said, "Can you take 5? 5 rejections in a day?" I thought, I maybe can't now, but I'll learn how to take 5. And then he said the thing that changed part of my life. There's a statement, isn't it? He said, "Can you take 5 rejections in a day from the 1 person?"
Wow.
Because if you can, you're a sales guy. And I would turn that round and say, "Can you take 5 rejections in a day from 1 person?" Because if you can, you're a business person.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, from what you've said, it really jumps to my mind that when you talk about you made that decision, and that is the difference, isn't it, between, when you look at people who have done things that were inconceivable. And it brings me back to, I can't remember whether it was Napoleon Hill or whoever it was, but what the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. And that is just, that just is incredibly powerful and follows it. And I do love Zig Ziglar, but I haven't read anything from him for years and years. So I'm going to go back and do that. Wendy, you've been very patiently waiting there. What are your kind of thoughts around this sort of consistent persistency? Is it something that comes naturally to you, or how do you kind of walk along with this?
Yeah, it definitely doesn't come naturally. And I think we had a bit of a conversation off air, didn't we, about the fact that my wealth dynamics profile, I'm a creator, and I do find it very difficult to carry out repetitive tasks. So it has taken quite a lot of focus on my part. And I think a big part of being able to do that and be consistent is around knowing what my why is and being really confident that, you know, every activity that I take consistently is leading me towards my why. So that kind of mindset psychology is really important. I think kind of going back to, you know, the number of times people need to see you, hear you is 7 times, I think, in marketing statistics. So certainly in past positions where we've been marketing products and services to people, they needed to kind of see and hear about us at least 7 times, often before people would buy. So, you know, I've kind of known for a long time that being consistent is really important, and that is what gets the results. And I think for me, it's looking at how I can improve being consistent by 1% every day, not just with kind of business, but with kind of personal habits as well. So I think it's been a challenge to get into habits for me, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I don't know if you've read Who Not How. Have you read that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
I have.
that is it. Oh, I can't remember who wrote it. Somebody will help me. Somebody write it in the chat for us who wrote that. Yeah, so that is really clever, because he talks about, you know, so you've spoken about, oh, you know, when I've got repetitive tasks, I don't want to do them. You're naturally a creator. I am too. So it's like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. We're great at kind of starting things, coming up with, you know, blue sky ideas, and then really it needs to be handed over to somebody else to get those bits done. But obviously when you're starting out, you have to kind of do everything. But are you kind of sort of seeing along the way of changing things? So for instance, for me, really early on, I knew I had to get automation into place. And I love I love tech only because I don't really understand it, but I love what it does for you. I'm not really very good at it, but I love what it does for you. And that's why I sort of was, I suppose, persisted with certain things until I could then have a business where I could have a VA. And so now my VA, you know, she's able to do all of those kind of things for me, and she gets everything sort of teched up. And also I want to push on having tech to support her as well. So it kind of falls down like that. So have you do you look at things? Do you go kind of, who can do this? Or is that still quite a challenge? Because I know it is a real challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think I came to terms with the fact that I cannot do everything very early on. And you know, I know kind of what my strengths are and what I do best. And I absolutely know when I'm doing something that I'm not really good at, and how much longer that takes me to do. So yeah, I came to terms with that a long time ago. So automation, bringing in support to do bits and pieces, delegating, I would say I'm pretty good at doing that.
Fantastic. And Tom, thanks so much. Yes, it's Who Not How, Dan Sullivan. I kept thinking a different Dan. I knew it wasn't that way. It's Dan Sullivan. Thank you. I was going to say Daniel Priestley, and I knew it wasn't him. So thanks, Tom. And have you got any sort of specific examples, Wendy, you know, of something that you were really consistent on, and when you look back, you think, wow, I'm really pleased I did, or something that you look back on and you think, oh, I really wish I had been consistent, knowing what I know now. I think had I just pushed on that little bit further, like I always love the stories of, you know, somebody, mining for gold, and they give up, and they're literally kind of millimeters away, and somebody else wins that battle. They've done all that hard work, and somebody else swoops in. Have you got any sort of examples yourself?
Nothing kind of really jumps to mind. I suppose a bit like what Paul said in terms of if I want something, then I will put my mind to it and move heaven and earth and be kind of persistent about achieving it. You know, kind of, and in some ways it's a bit like the law of attraction and manifesting. It's that, you know, where I live just now, 10 years ago, I would never have thought that I would be living here. But I used to sit in a cafe right across the water and look across and say, one day I'm going to live there. I had no idea how, but that's what was going to happen. And then wheels turned, things moved, and and here I am living here. It didn't just magically happen. Of course, activities were put in place, but it was about having that kind of, vision. That's where I want to be. That's what I want to be doing. And then naturally you start looking for those things that are going to help you get there, being persistent, consistent about that's the vision, that's what I want to be, and finding what you need to do to get there.
Amazing. Yeah, that's tremendous, and congratulations. And you hear so many stories of this, having a vision, and living in that vision, and knowing that you are going to achieve it. I mean, I've got a small one at the moment, and it kind of makes me laugh. So as you all know, I'm trying to get into this social media, and I'm going for the start now, get perfect later. I'm just, and also the other reason is that I know the more people that you can help, then obviously I believe in karma and all of those kind of things, and I absolutely love helping other people. So I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and I'll do these things. And at the beginning of the year, we started our YouTube channel, and we basically had no YouTube videos. And I know that really to start moving, so I always I love the analogy of the flywheel, where you're literally pushing like with every bit of strength that you have, and it's barely moving. And for months we had like hardly any videos, so we started off by doing one a week. Well, clearly even at the end of the first month we didn't have many, and then we kind of thought, well, actually we could make those videos into shorter videos. So then we started building that up, and then you can make, so we've got short longs and long shorts. So we've got all these different names for all these different types of videos. And then as time progressed, people actually started to subscribe, because obviously you measure on your subscription, and we've got KPIs and things like that. And then as time has gone on, it was a real neck and neck. So let's say we'd have 50 videos, we'd have like 45 subscribers, and then it would get up to 50 subscribers, and then we'd have added some more videos. So it was kind of neck and neck. And anyway, I haven't checked this morning, but I know over the weekend, let me open up, we were very near 200 subscribers. So that's it, we're at 195 subscribers and 144 videos. So we've actually got a bit of a gap now between the number of videos and the number of subscribers. And I met someone the other day, and I said, and somebody who, it was actually Martin Rapley, who I've interviewed on here before. And he said, I said, oh, how many YouTube subscribers have you got? And he said, oh, I think I've got 1,100, so about 1,100. I was like, oh my, that's amazing, I'm still at this number. How long did it take you to get there? And he said, oh, we've been really working on that for 3 years. And I actually thought, wow, I need to really kind of understand how far in 6 months we've come. And I could have given up. I could have thought, because there are days, let's be fair, where you just think, oh, I really, I've got to think of another something else to talk about. And I don't want it to sound like I don't love it, because I genuinely do. But there are times when you don't feel as creative, and obviously trying to get other people to want to come and talk to you. So there's lots of things where I've had to really be consistently persistent. And I really feel that flywheel is starting to move. It's getting slightly easier. But am I going to get to 1,000 by the end of the year? I don't know, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep talking about it. And now whereas I was a bit shy and embarrassed to talk about it because I had no videos and no subscribers, so I didn't look that great. Whereas now at least I have videos and we do have some subscribers. So it's just literally kind of moving that on. So yeah, I suppose that's my most recent one. And in fact, that's why I kind of thought of this topic, because I thought, wow, actually, one should take that moment to say, congratulations, you have kept going. And I think that's kind of really important. So so Paul, I know you've got lots and lots of stories, so let's come back to you and give us something else to talk about here.
Social media thing's interesting. During lockdown, me and my wife, who's my business partner, were kind of bored and locked in the house in 2020. So we decided to make a podcast called Property Development Live. And we did that with a chap called Martin Davis, and we interviewed a couple of people and we talked among ourselves about various subjects. And for the 20 weeks that we were in lockdown, essentially, we made 20 podcasts. And to be honest with you, had you have said to me at the beginning, how many people are going to look at these? Because we didn't do any kind of form of promotion at all. No paid promotion, we just kind of made them. I think it was as much at that point in time to feel like we were doing something, and also to kind of communicate with people as well, right? And I enjoyed the post-production stuff as well, because when I was younger, I was very into sound. I was a music guy, and I was very into sound. So I enjoyed the post-production part of it as well, when you're kind of locked in the house with nothing else to do. And the last time I looked, which is probably about 6 months ago, I've not looked at it or listened to them for a long, long time, because we did it back in 2020. It had around 8,000 listens. And you kind of think, but, so social media is very interesting. I think if you put, so we put quality rather than quantity in those podcasts. And I think if you put good quality out there, people are still listening to them 2-3 years later, and it's a bit similar with the book that we released last year, the how to write a business plan in property, right? Unpacking your property business plan. We kind of initially wrote that because as an investor myself, I was getting some very weak business plans coming to me, and some of them were not business plans at all. They were concepts or ideas or vision boards. I love vision boards. I love the idea that somebody thinks they can bring you a vision board and you're going to hand them £300,000. That's just brilliant. And that's happened to me. So we wrote it essentially so that we could hand it to people and say to them, right, fill that in and come back later. And interestingly enough, it has, I wouldn't say it's taken off, but we have had lots of sales that we never expected. And 25% of the sales are coming from the USA, which are really interesting because it was written in a very British style, right? And we're now thinking about, we just had a conversation yesterday on our daily walk about whether we kind of invest some more money into it and put onto audio, because I think it's the type of book that would work on audio. And it's that, persistently and consistently being there. And another kind of story I want to tell is last week I was working with one of my clients as a business consultant, and we're working on something you've heard me talk about on here before, which is a success journal, which is a journal that you kind of fill in every day, and kind of you write down the little successes. You don't write down that you created world peace, or you don't write down that you made £1 million, or you cured cancer. You write down, I got to work on time. Because if you think about that, if you didn't get to work on time, you would class that as a failure. But getting to work on time, we don't really class as a success. And I was talking to him and his business partner, and they were saying, we're really struggling at when to do this. And this is the consistency thing. And I said, right, tie it into something that you do every day. And he said, we have quite an interesting kind of work life, and we don't do the same things every day. I said, I didn't say in your work life. I said, I'm quite sure that you eat every day. You certainly look like you do. I'm quite sure that you clean your teeth, if not every day, most of them. Right. And it was interesting going through the exercise with them of different points in the day that the two partners would fill in their success journal related to something in their life. So one of them said, well, I put my children to bed about 7 o'clock and I read them a story. And I said, so do the success journal directly after that. Then you have a bit of spare time, do it directly after that. Right. But make a rule. And here's, I think, the key to consistency. Make a rule that you cannot read the children the story if you don't fill in your success journal. And the other one said, I do it in the evening. I said, do you clean your teeth? He said, yeah, before I go to bed every night. Otherwise, my mouth feels terrible. I said, right, you can't clean your teeth unless you've done your success journal. And there was a chap I was working with a couple of years ago who was very fond of eating. And I said, put it round about a meal because you really like your meals. And you can't eat the meal
Until.
And I was speaking to him recently, and I said, "You still doing the Success Journal?" And that was about 2.5 years ago. And he said, "Yeah, Paul, I like to eat." Meaning he still had that rule that if he didn't do the Success Journal, he missed a meal.
He missed a meal.
Right. So persistency is one thing, right? Persistency I think it's inherent in my nature, but consistency is difficult for all of us.
Yeah. And I think also
and what I've found is if I want to be consistent with something, I have to tie it to something I already consistently do. And usually something I get something out of doing. You know, I might not enjoy cleaning my teeth, but I get the results of my teeth not falling out, especially at my age. So I clean my teeth on a regular basis. If you said to me, Paul, you couldn't clean your teeth again, right, I wouldn't be happy. So therefore I tie it to something that I do consistently, and then I just add the new consistent thing to it. If you're going to do that, you have to do this. Yeah. And you need a tiny bit of self-discipline to do that, not a huge part of self-discipline. Because what happens is, instinctively, you've got neural pathways inside your brain. And neural pathways are kind of like motorways and B roads. So we have a neural pathway is a regular pathway that our brain goes to, right? So if I say to you A, your neural pathway will go B. Most people in the audience, if I say A, your neural pathway will go B, right? And it's almost, that's a big wide motorway, if you like, the link between A and B, right? Whereas you're not going to go to Z because that's a road that you very rarely travel from A to Z, right? Yeah. Not as often as you travel from A to B, right? And if you took an obscure letter from the alphabet, like Q, you don't go from A to Q, right? Because that's an even narrower pathway. So you've got A to B, big pathway, A to Z, reasonable size pathway, A to P doesn't exist as a pathway. So if you want consistency in your life, find something you're consistently already doing. Then tie the new thing that you want to be consistent with to that. And what will happen is, after a number of weeks or months, when you think about, so that chap who does his Success Journal when he cleans his teeth, he will think Success Journal, teeth cleaning, Success Journal. So if you want consistency in your life, find something you're already consistent with and tie something to it. So, for example, I'm at an age now where I walk every day. Right, I've just came back in from my morning constitution. I'll have one in the afternoon, and there's a call that I need to make most days, if not every day. So now what I do is I tie that call into my walk. And what I found myself doing this morning was closing the door behind me and dialing the number without ever thinking about I'm going to make this call, because the call now is attached to the walk. So as I walk out the door and close the door behind me, I was unconscious of it this morning and then conscious of it. As I closed the door behind me, I was dialing the number.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I love that. And that's a really good hack to, as you say, to associate one thing with another, and then it comes on, because I know inherently we have our kind of paradigms, which are just a whole host of small habits, aren't they? So it's a whole load of habits, but what we try to do is we try to change an entire paradigm, and that's just too much. So it might be that we need to do a tiny thing to move towards that. So you know, the easy example is, you know, people going to the gym. So one of the things, you know, that I hear, that if you decided, right, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to the gym in the morning. So if you go to bed in your gym gear, it's going to be even embarrassing for yourself to remove the gym gear having not gone to the gym. So, you know, I think it's like, you know, there are games that you can play with yourself. There are things that you can do, but also, as you said, you can link to things. You can have, you know, accountability partners. There's obviously KPIs, so, you know, your key performance indicators. So I know I've put in we're second half of the year now, aren't we? So the next kind of 90 days that I work from. So I've got my new goals, which is still going towards my yearly goals, but it's the next stretch. And I've got a whole host of new things that I'm now measuring. And for instance, one of them is the number of letters that I send out per week. And that's a really interesting one. So again, but I'm making it so it's not just me. I've told lots of people. I have an accountability group. It's written down each week. My VA is waiting for me to tell her which places to send the letters to enable us to keep doing it. So again, am I going to get results immediately? I would imagine that's highly unlikely. But is it going to be a longer term thing? And also on top of that, it is part of a small habit that I'm now installing that either can be added to or can be grown or all of those other things. So I really like that. It's kind of like having these different ways. And for some people, certain things work, and for other people, they don't work. And this is where I love this kind of consistent persistence and the persistent consistence, because it may be, if we talk about what, Wendy was saying, that, you're really desperate, there are certain things that are just so boring, admin tasks, repetitive tasks, and they're really boring. And so it's kind of like, well, what could I do to overcome that? Now, it may be that along the way, there's this just constant, it's so painful, like this procrastination keeps coming on and on and on. So you try something and it still feels really painful. It's a really uphill struggle. And then somebody else says, oh, well, actually, had you considered trying this? So you try that. So you're still being persistent. You're consistently doing something. It's like, okay, well, actually, this is a little bit easier now. Doing it in this way is a little bit easier. And then it may get to the stage where, as we talked about, you may then get a VA to do it. And then all you're doing is measuring what they've done. And so it's this sort of, it can be a journey as well. But as long as we don't have that scenario where we start something like going to the gym and then, week 2 of January, we've stopped. So it's, I think it's like all of these different ways. Sometimes there'll be certain things that we'll have to use each and every one of them, and hearing how other people can do things and have been able to overcome things, have been able to deal with procrastination, I think is really interesting.
I think it's starting with small things as well, isn't it? So I log onto my computer at 7 o'clock every morning to start work. The first thing I do before I log on is decide what I'm grateful for. What happened the day before that I'm really grateful for. So that kind of daily practicing of gratitude has become, a consistent habit for me in that respect. And I think in terms of what we do as kind of in the property world, is one of the big things is building our network. And I think consistently for me, a habit is making contact with 5 people a day. So not necessarily, seeking out new people, but making sure that over the course of the day, I've reached out to 5 people to either start a conversation or continue a conversation, or just check in and see how they're doing, and that kind of maintaining those relationships. So by doing that consistently over the day, over the week and over the month, I'm kind of building up that network and growing that network, reaching out to people. And I find that's been quite important in terms of kind of, learning from others and getting into the right networks with the right people that can help me with my journey and I can help them with theirs.
Wow, that's quite a massive commitment there. So how did that come about, if I might ask? Was there a goal? I mean, obviously you've sort of spoken about networking, but that sort of slightly terrifies me, that many communications. I mean, obviously,
well, how does that look? Do it naturally anyway, probably. It might be a couple of texts, and it's not, sometimes I'll do them all in the morning, but I kind of think at the end of the day, right, have I contacted 5 people? If I haven't, then I'll go onto LinkedIn and see, who have I not spoken with recently, and just reach out and say, how you doing? Or I might have worked on something during the day and it would be a case of then, going and updating somebody on what I've been working on. And I think I did a 5-day challenge a few years back with Paula Wingate from Influential Minds. And this is one of her big things, this 5 a day, And that's, you know, building your network by being consistent with 5 a day is kind of how to grow it. And that's just, you know, I'm not saying that I necessarily was consistent with that in the beginning, but what I had learned was that if I missed weeks of not doing it, then there were less interactions the following week, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it has, and it's, you know, it's across all the channels as well. It's not, you know, it's
amazing. I mean, I think certainly networking for me, there's a local one. It's actually not that local at all to me, but it is a Kent networking group. It's a much smaller one, and you know, I was really definite that I wanted to go every month. Now it just so happened that I was actually away for the last 2 months, and it was on this last Wednesday. And again, it was kind of a bit like, oh, it's a really long journey home. It's, you know, it has a massive impact on the rest of my day, because I like to be in bed by 10 to be able to get up at 5, and I can't possibly get home in that time scale. So it is always a bit more tiring to do that. But you know, I really wanted to go, and I knew I'd made that commitment, and I turned up, and it was just, again, it was great. And the speaker, I was meant to be there, you know, and there was so much knowledge coming from this person. So yeah, it is interesting how, you know, it seems kind of serendipitous, doesn't it? But I think it's not serendipitous. It's like people talk about luck. It's not luck. You know, you are where you are because of these things that you've sort of taken on board, so to speak. So I saw that Lynn had popped up, but she's gone now. So really, really interesting. Any comments on that, Paul?
I'm not a huge networker, to be honest with you. I've always kind of believed that the quality of your network is much more important than the quantity of your network. So I have kind of mixed feelings on networking generally. I think social media and the kind of emergence of network meetings, etc., for property has made people obsessed about kind of like getting, you know, loads and loads of cards and speaking to loads and loads of people. And I don't know how productive that is. I mean, Wendy will be able to say better than me. I would rather have a close and working relationship with 10 people than network with 1,000. Because I think networking, I mean, could anybody be in business? One of those things, isn't it? Could anybody be in business without a business network? It would be very difficult. Could anybody have too big of business network? I think you can. I think, you know, I look at people who, you know, through whatever social media they have, they're obsessed about the number of followers, right? And I learned something in business very, very early. Don't confuse the turnover rate with the conversion rate. So don't confuse the fact that you've got 3,000 people on your, you know, whatever it is, 3,000 people coming into a clubhouse room, for example, Emma, means that you're going to do business with 3,000 people. In fact, of that 3,000 people, you might do business with 10. Right. Now, if you've got a more succinct clubhouse room, for example, let's just use that because we're on one at the moment, right? You might do business with 30 or 40% of the people in your room, although there's only 50 people in your room. Now, which one of those is actually more important? Now, some people in this media age believe having 3,000 people in your room is important because that's 3,000 people, you know, who are doing business with you. You used a YouTube example. We did a YouTube as well around about the same time, around about 2020. And I only put about half a dozen videos on it. And I think we've got something like 50 subscribers. And I was looking at it a couple of years ago. I was looking at 2021, actually. And I have done business with 65% of the people who are subscribers on my YouTube channel. And if I put that into numbers, that is a middle stage 7-figure number. Wow. So, you know, this who you get working with I think is more important than how big your network is. But different people have a different view.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's not about having thousands of followers necessarily. It's about having sort of touch points with 25 people across a week, and that the output or the aim for that is to have one good conversation. So it's to kind of, you know, look at those 25 people and see, okay, who here could I work with, and then kind of taking that conversation on. So it is about kind of working out who are people that we would work well together, and kind of discounting people who, you know, potentially are not suitable kind of matches, if you like. And it's, I guess when you get to your stage, you know, you've probably been through that process over the years, and you can easily identify those people. I think when you're starting out, it's kind of, you know, getting to know. And what I find amazing is people, you know, might put something on their profile and you sort of think, well, that's what they do. And then when you have a conversation with them, you suddenly find out lots of different things about them and see lots of other opportunities. So I think by, you know, aiming to have one really good conversation a week, that kind of helps to then define that better. I think, does that make sense?
Yeah, I really like that. One of the things that always resonates with me is talking about you're like filling your cup up first, but also in relationships you have a cup, and the more you contribute to each other, that cup kind of fills up. So if you've got a full cup, and let's say somebody, and let's now talk about it in a business relationship, and they let you down once, because your cup is so full and you've had so many positive experiences before, you'll kind of let that go and that'll be fine. But, you know, the cup will slightly empty, but as long as more positive things happen, it remains full. Whereas I suppose if you're going into a relationship and the cup's completely empty, you've maybe met once, but there could be major opportunities. If that cup is empty, it means that it might not grow. So I kind of see what you're doing is about kind of filling that cup. It's having those experiences, those chats, that kind of learning about each other. I also see it as I really like to, you know, if somebody's done something really special, to kind of reward them in your way. So it might be that you get them a small gift. You know, so if somebody's organized something, you know, take them a box of chocolates or something to make them feel, yeah, wow, I feel really appreciated by doing that. And that's kind of another thing that you can put in that cup to feel that appreciation. So I kind of see that, because I do have, especially in LinkedIn, I've got thousands and thousands of people that I've connected to, and I have no idea where they are, which is why when you said that, I just think, oh my gosh, I don't know where I would even start. Because clearly I came from this point in the past where it was like, you've got to have as many followers as you can, and I do. Yeah. But, you know, of those, how many do I even know? How many could I pick up a phone to? Not really that many. So they're not great, are they? It's not that useful.
I quite like the ethos of BNI. Now, I've never joined BNI. I've attended some meetings occasionally as a sub, but I like the idea of their kind of ethos is about finding people who can help other people. So by learning lots about lots of different people, you know, when you come up with a problem, there's a good chance I've met someone that I think might be able to help you. And so then I can connect you two, and then I've done my bit to help others. And I think that I really like that idea of it as well.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why, interestingly, I am in the BNI. Is because you know, when people say to me, oh, I could, you know, I really want to know, you know, have you got a good broker? Have you got a good this? Have you got a good that? Now, obviously, I'm not just going to recommend anyone. These people I've got to know, as you say, know, like, and trust. And also within that room, there is a certain number of people who are, for me, property professionals who come and talk about things that I would just never hear about. maybe new legislation, maybe all of these. So it kind of enables you to keep on top of things, and then by understanding and hearing more about them, as you say, you can recommend them. So yeah, no, that is an interesting one. So I can't believe it's already the top of the hour. I was kind of wondering whether we'd fill our time. I've got a whole long list that we haven't even touched on. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting topic, and for me, the whole understanding that you can, and I really liked actually going back to what Paul said at the beginning, is that humans, I wrote it down, humans are consistent in being inconsistent. I think that was correct. And that is really, it was almost like a light bulb, Paul. It was almost like, oh, thank goodness. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just me. But the fact that I've now given myself permission to persistently be consistent and consistently be persistent, I love that. To me, it's like a circle. I see it so clearly in my head. And rather than beating myself up if I haven't been consistent, I just think, right, I'm going to persistently go back to it, because I know that for me is really important. But yeah, Wendy, have you got anything sort of closing comments from this today?
No, I think if you can improve being consistent by 1% every day, by the end of the year, you'll be 3,786.2% more consistent.
Wow, that is quite tremendous. I love it. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great summer. And Paul, if I might close with you, because I know you're always going to have some fabulous ditty to finish with. Would you mind closing with a comment, please?
Yeah, I'm getting a bit of a reputation for the kind of the final words on Clubhouse. The kind of closing. A couple of the rooms that I'm involved in are quite keen on the closing the room, and I think closing of a room is really about taking everybody's thoughts and considerations over the last hour and putting them into one sentence that people can go away and use, right? At best, they can go away and use it. At worst, they can go away and think about it. And I think from today, we've got a couple of very usable things. Wendy was saying, just be a little more consistent every day, right? And I was saying that realize that you're inconsistent by nature. So being that little bit consistent every day is not going to be nearly as easy as you think it is. So tie that consistency to something you're already doing, that you're already consistent in. I think the biggest, I see a lot of businesses as an angel investor, and I see a lot of business people as a consultant. And when you look at the statistics for businesses, whether it be inside property sector or outside property sector, 90% of all businesses fail in the first year. It's an amazing statistic that hasn't changed probably in the last 50 years. And there's lots of theories on why. Why do 90% of businesses fail? And there's no one reason. I've discovered in 45 years in business and met literally thousands of business people who have failed and succeeded. But I'll tell you one thing that I've seen that's consistent about the failures. They expect too much of themselves in the first place. They set their expectations of themselves too high. They believe that they're capable of being more persistent or consistent than they actually are in any other aspect of their life. And one of the things I learned to do very early in business was realize I'm human. I'm imperfect.
Yeah.
And I'm going to fail. And one of the reasons I like the success journal and writing down every day the little successes we have, like getting to work on time, like making that call, like going for that walk, whatever it is because I look at all of these success journals over a number of years. And I feel like a success who sometimes fails. I don't feel like a failure who sometimes succeeds. And I think we in business we set out with too big of expectations of ourselves. We lie to ourselves about how persistent or consistent we are. In fact, the one thing we do persistently is lie to ourselves. And the one thing we do consistently is lie to ourselves. And the people that I've met that have really succeeded, way beyond the level I have, and we've done okay, are the people who are very honest with themselves about how persistent or consistent they're going to be.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Paul. Yes, gosh, so many amazing facts in there for us to come back and wade through. So guys, this is me for the next 6 weeks. I will be doing Mind the Property, because I do that once a month. I can't remember which week it is, but it's second or third week in August. So I will have one more that I will do. But yeah, have a fantastic summer, everyone. And please, again, I put a link up to one of the interviews I did with Paul, all about property business planning. So that is a link to the YouTube channel, which, as you've heard, I'm trying to get to 200 subscribers. So please do pop over there and do subscribe. And we are constantly, pulling more and more content in there to help you. So yeah, thank you so much. So thank you again to Wendy. Thank you again to Paul. Really, really appreciate your time here. And yeah, thanks again, everybody, and take care. Have a great summer.